Energy vampires don't just drain your energy, they leave something behind that keeps working on you long after they're gone. Think about it. Bring in the memory of your last encounter with an energy vampire where you felt seriously drained. How did you feel after? Remember the restlessness, the obsessive thoughts about them, inability to sleep, the strange impatience, the yuck feeling as if something foreign has entered your energetic field. Do you remember the string of bad luck that appeared right after? The illness that showed up days later? You might have thought it was a coincidence, but what if they weren't separate events at all? What if they were all part of the same energetic process? In this video, I'm going to share what I believe energy vampires actually do to your system besides the drain, and most importantly, how to recover after the energetic bite so you can minimize the harmful after effects. Let's get started. Welcome to Ditch the Leech, a metaphor-driven channel where we learn to protect ourselves from energy vampires such as narcissists, psychopaths, and everyday manipulative individuals. This video is about how to recover after the energetic bite, that interaction with an energy vampire where they poke a hole in your energetic field, provoke a strong emotional reaction in you, and feed on your resources. But before we talk about recovery, we need to understand what actually happens to you beyond just energy loss. Once you see the full picture, the recovery steps will make much more sense. Let's dive in. What happens after the energetic bite? I believe that energy vampires have a very specific effect on a person's energy. They don't just take energy. Their impact is far more complex. There are systemic effects involved. It's similar to what happens when a leech bites a human's body. It releases chemicals that can continue to affect a person long after the interaction has ended. When it comes to energy vampires, I notice these effects very clearly. The restlessness, impatience, agitation. I have difficulty falling asleep on the night of interaction. Sometimes there is even a strange sense of euphoria, which I call fake positivity. At the same time, there is another layer that appeared a little later. The throat becomes dry, speaking becomes difficult. There is this hard to describe sense of energetic depletion, like my life juices are drying out. And then there is this yucky sensation, a kind of dirty feeling, like something foreign enters my energetic field and lingers there for days or even months. It's almost like getting sick with a virus. I believe there are three main things that happen when an energy vampire successfully bites someone: the cord, the puncture, and the residue. Sometimes there is also fourth element, the poison, but it doesn't occur in every case. If we look at the behavior of leeches and mosquitoes, the animal equivalents of these vampire-like creatures, we see a very similar pattern. If you've ever been bitten by a mosquito, you know they don't just take your blood. The bite itches for a while afterward. And if you've ever dealt with leeches, you know they inject substances into your bloodstream that continue affecting the body long after they're gone. Now, let's briefly explore the feeding cycle of hematophagous organisms. Trust me, I promise there is a reason I'm going into this level of detail. This will make a lot more sense later when we talk about energy vampires. Hematophagous organisms is a scientific term for blood-feeding creatures like mosquitoes and leeches. In addition to physically piercing the skin and extracting what they want, your blood, mosquitoes and leeches inject a mixture of biologically active substances into your body, including things like anticoagulants and antiplatelet compounds, which prevent blood from clotting so it's easier for them to keep consuming it, anesthetics, which reduce pain and make the bite less noticeable in the moment, vasodilators, which widen blood vessels and increase blood flow to the area, and a variety of proteins and enzymes, including ones that help them go undetected by your immune system. In addition to being hematophagous or blood-feeding organisms, they are also vectors, which means they can carry and transmit disease-causing pathogens during feeding, including malaria-causing parasites, Zika virus, West Nile virus. So what looks like a simple bite is actually a multi-layered biological interaction, one that doesn't end the moment the organism detaches. Now try to remember your last interaction with the energy vampire. How did you feel afterward? I definitely noticed a similarity. Just as leeches inject anticoagulants to keep blood in its easy-to-flow state, I feel something similar happening energetically, as if my energy is put into an accelerated state. It speeds up. I experience restlessness, agitation, nervousness. I'm more likely to do something impulsively. In the same way leeches inject anesthetic and anti-inflammatory compounds so that the host doesn't immediately notice the bite, I experience the anesthetic-like effects too. There is a kind of blindness to what this person is doing to me. Sometimes weeks, months, or even years pass by before I realize, wow, that person used and abused me. The signs seem obvious in hindsight, but during the interaction, it's almost as if a part of me can see clearly. In fact, I may even feel euphoric during the interaction. It feels like a drug that makes me high, not a poison. Now, the leeches inject vasodilators to attract more blood to the area from which they feed. There is a similar energetic effect too. I have this strange feeling of being unable to stop giving my energy to the energy vampire. I may consciously decide that I don't want to talk to that person again. I may tell myself that the last interaction was enough. I'm not going to do this anymore. And yet, something inside me keeps pulling me back toward them. Then there is this learned helplessness. It's a strange feeling of being unable to leave the energy vampire, or of struggling to set boundaries and say no to what they ask for. I call it paralysis-like effects. In our comparison with hematophagous organisms, some species of ticks release neuroactive compounds that paralyze their victims so they can feed on them more easily. Sounds familiar? Then there are cord-like effects, like no matter how much I try not to think about energy vampire, I can't. My thoughts keep circling back to them as though parts of my energy is still connected to them. And of course, let's not forget about the most obvious effect, the drain itself. The voice becomes weaker, the throat gets dry. There is a feeling of emptiness, a sense that something has been taken from me. And if the drain was significant, I'd get sick, often with some sort of flu-like illness, and experience a chain of bad luck. Many people think the main issue is a drain. They think, if only I can recharge my energy, I'll be okay. But it's not the case. It's like a fly trapped in a spider web. It has to escape the web first before it can recover. These after effects are what makes interaction with energy vampires so dangerous. They are what keeps a person hooked, allowing them to recover just enough to be drained again and again. That's why I don't think recovery is just about solving the one problem most people focus on, restoring lost energy. It's about dealing with several layers of injury at once. First, there is a cord, the attachment that keeps pulling on the energy. In the mosquito analogy, it's the energetic equivalent of the mosquito's feeding tube, still embedded in the system and drawing resources. Second, there is a puncture, the breach in the energetic field where the interaction occurred. In the mosquito analogy, it's the wound that stays even after the insect flies away. Third, there is a residue, everything left behind in the system. In the mosquito analogy, it's all the chemicals they inject to feed effectively. And occasionally there is a force element, the poison. It's my belief that not every energy vampire carries it, but some do. It's that yucky after effect that happens after energy exchange with a person who has a very, very heavy energy. In the mosquito analogy, it's a malaria. How to recover after interaction with energy vampire? Now we are ready to talk about recovery. I tend to see recovery as having 3 stages, occasionally 4. First, I work on cutting the cord and detoxifying myself. Then I focus on clearing whatever residue the interaction left behind. I also work on strengthening what I think of as energetic immunity, especially if the encounter left behind some form of a toxic influence. And only after that do I focus on healing the energetic injury itself and recharging my energy. This video has 2 parts. Here I will discuss only the first step, cutting the cord. First, because it's essential, and even if you only do this and nothing else afterwards, you still have a good chance to recover. And also because if you haven't done this yet, nothing else really matters. Being energetically connected to an energy vampire is like having a joint bank account with a gambler. No matter how much you earn, it will always be drained and you'll be left with nothing. And it's not just that they drain you. The cord works both ways. They'll pollute you with their junk in return. And if you haven't worked on that cord, I don't recommend watching part 2 of this video. It may not be helpful to you. Part 1. Cutting the cord. If you've interacted with an energy vampire, chances are there's still some form of energetic connection between you and them, what I call a cord. Unlike leeches in nature, which attach for about 30 minutes, get their fill and fall off, energy vampires seems to need a constant supply of energy. In my experience, they maintain the cord until there is little left to gain from the victim. They don't detach voluntarily while the victim is still healthy or has any resources in some shape or form. Energy vampires actively maintain the cord, and whenever the cord starts weakening, they seem to reappear. A text, a phone call, a seemingly innocent message, something that pulls the victim's attention back toward them. This is a cord-strengthening behavior. An energy vampire, at least in my experience, is like an energy thief. They stay connected for as long as there is energy available to draw from. When something bad happens, though, and you need their help, they flee. So how do we cut the cord? Now, I'm only going to share what has worked for me personally. I've tried many of the techniques people recommend online, visualizing scissors, imagining cords being cut, various guided meditations. Maybe those methods work for some people, but honestly, it didn't work for me. What consistently works for me is much simpler. No contact. And then with time, the cord weakens and eventually falls off. I know you probably don't like hearing that. Everyone wants some quick, easy method. Light a candle, look at the stars, wash your body with the morning dew, buy that special cord-cutting precious stone. I didn't find those things particularly effective. If what we're talking about here, the unseen things, the energetic cords, are actually true, they would look like a wire connecting you and them, almost like they're attached to you, like a dead phone still plugged into a charger. And you can't just wish that drain away. You have to actually disconnect to stop it. I know in some cases it's very hard to go no contact because energy vampires usually work very hard to cut all your exit opportunities. They want you to stay as their donor so they can feed on you until your last breath. That's their fairy tale version of happily ever after. I believe that it's essential to escape as fast as possible, even if it means leaving with nothing. I wish somebody had told me this earlier, because like many others, I stayed far too long until the damage I suffered became so severe that I still suffer the consequences from which I'm not sure I will ever recover. So what is no contact? It's closing all communication, totally. My version of the no contact rule isn't limited to a single energy vampire, the main troublemaker. It's about removing all energy vampires from my life, as well as anyone who tries to pull me back into contact with them. The so-called flying monkeys. It's hard, but I don't think I'd even be alive to make this video if I hadn't done that. So how long does it take for a cord to dissolve? There are several factors to consider. First, it depends on how strong the cord was to begin with. If it's a close relative, like a mother or a romantic partner with whom you've had sexual contact, those cords tend to be the strongest and may take a long time to dissolve completely after you go no contact. It also depends on how strong the energy vampire is. Some energy vampires seem capable of establishing a powerful connection very quickly, even without sexual contact. I don't know how it works. I just share my understanding of this unusual topic. Now let's talk about strong cord cutting versus weak cord cutting. I found that the fastest way to weaken a cord is to clearly communicate a boundary. This is what I call strong cord cutting. Clearly communicating a boundary can look like sending a text message like, I have decided to end this connection. Please do not contact me again, and blocking them everywhere. The action here is more important than the words. You can do strong cord cutting without saying a single word, which sometimes is necessary when dealing with someone who may be violent, where the priority is simply to leave and protect yourself. There is something powerful about consciously withdrawing permission. It reminds me of old vampire myth. The vampire could only enter the house if invited inside. Whether that's literally true on an energetic level, I don't know. But I do know that I feel a difference when I consciously decide and declare that someone no longer has access to my energy. Without that, I found that cord cutting takes much longer. Many times in my life, I simply stopped talking to someone because I felt uncomfortable being direct. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I was afraid to be assertive and send a message like that. This is what I call weak cord cutting. In my experience, if I just try to avoid them without taking real actions like blocking them, the cord lingers much longer. A clear statement followed by some form of action, such as blocking their contact everywhere, has worked far better for me. Additionally, if he or she continues to persecute you, you can use that message that clearly shows you voiced a boundary as a proof that he or she is not respecting your boundaries. Now, let's talk about something that may help speed up the cord cutting process. In nature, leeches are repelled by salt. One well-known way to remove a leech is to sprinkle salt on it. I don't know exactly how this works on an energetic level, but I do notice a difference when I use salt. It can be in the form of a daily body scrub or taking salt bath, just ordinary salt, the same salt I use in my food. If I have access to halotherapy or salt caves, I also find that helpful. Many traditions associate salt with purifications and cleansing. Even the Bible contains the phrase, "You are the salt of the earth." Again, I don't fully know how or why it works. I only know that I personally notice a difference. And of course, don't treat anything you hear in this video or anywhere else as a medical advice. Always use common sense and consult a healthcare professional before trying anything that may affect your health. Now, I want to ask you something. What do you think can help cut the cord with an energy vampire? Your comments can help people who are looking for solutions from this horrendous misery. So if you know something, share it. Enjoy Ditch the Leech? If you want to ditch energy vampires, recover your sense of self, and build a brand new life, this channel is for you. Subscribe and let's rise like a phoenix together, building boundaries so strong that no leech ever gets close again.